Adaugo stood in the middle of the sparsely furnished living room, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she surveyed the boxes stacked around her. The apartment was smaller than the house she had once shared with Uche, but it was hers, a fresh start. The walls were still bare, and the faint scent of fresh paint lingered in the air. The space was quiet, save for the soft hum of the ceiling fan overhead and the occasional rustle of cardboard as she unpacked. Her heart felt heavy, but not because of the move. It was the weight of the truth she had uncovered, or rather, the truth she had never known. Uche had lied to her. She sank onto the couch, pressing her fingers against her temples. Kingsley. The name echoed in her mind, sharp and unfamiliar. A son Uche had never mentioned. A secret so big, so deeply buried, that it made her question everything she thought she knew about the man she had loved. Was it possible? Could Uche have had another child before her? And if so, why had he never told her? Her thoughts were interrupted by a burst of laughter from the hallway. Chigazi, her 6-year-old son, came running in, his small feet pattering against the tiled floor. He held up his new school uniform, his eyes shining with excitement. "Mommy, look! It fits me!" He twirled around, his white short-sleeved shirt neatly tucked into navy blue shorts. His tiny socks reached just above his ankles, and his polished black shoes gleamed under the soft light of the apartment. Adaugo forced a smile as she reached out to adjust the collar of his shirt. "You look so handsome, my love," she murmured, brushing a hand over his neatly cut hair. Chigazi beamed. "I can't wait to go to school. My teacher said we will learn new songs and numbers. And I will make new friends." His enthusiasm was contagious, but Adaugo could barely focus. She wanted to be excited for him. This was a big moment, a milestone, but her mind kept drifting back to Uche's betrayal. She had spent years believing in their love, trusting every word he spoke. How could he have hidden something like this? Why did he choose to leave her in the dark? She watched as Chigazi ran across the living room, picking up his backpack and pretending to be in class. "Mummy, say good morning, pupils," he instructed, imitating a teacher. Adaugo chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Good morning, pupils." Chigazi straightened his back, placing his hands behind him. "Good morning, Ma," he responded in a sing-song voice, then burst into giggles. For a brief moment, the weight on her chest lightened. Her son was her world now, the only piece of Uche she had left. And yet, as she gazed at him, she saw it again, the striking resemblance. His nose, his smile, the way his dimples deepened when he laughed. He was the spitting image of his father. Her throat tightened. If Uche could keep such a secret from her, what else had he hidden? The question gnawed at her, refusing to let her rest. She had moved into this apartment to start over, to heal. But how could she truly heal when she didn't know the full truth? Her fingers curled into fists. She needed answers, and she was going to get them. The afternoon sunlight barely made its way through the heavy curtains of the bedroom. The room was dark, suffocating, mirroring the weight pressing against her chest. She lay curled up in bed, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the ridges of the bedsheet. Days had passed like this, locked away, refusing to leave, refusing to work, refusing to live. A sharp, impatient voice cut through the silence. "Mummy, I said I don't want that one. I want the other one." She flinched at the sound, pulling the covers over her head. He was nothing like his father. While his father had been calm, composed, and strategic, he was headstrong, impatient, just like her. She saw herself in him, in the way he refused to accept things he didn't like, in the way he always wanted control. He was stubborn, restless, unwilling to bend to the world around him. Her body ached with exhaustion, "Lower your voice," she muttered, but he was already stomping across the apartment, dragging his school bag behind him in frustration. She knew she should get up, make him something to eat, talk to him, but she couldn't. Every breath she took was a reminder. She had killed him. The thought was a noose around her neck, tightening with every passing day. The acid had never been meant for him. Everything had been carefully planned, every detail laid out. It was supposed to be her rival, not him. But it had gone wrong, and now she was drowning. The world outside moved on, but she remained trapped in her guilt. She had tried countless times to escape it, to end it all. But every time she stared at the pills in her palm, or stood on the edge of her balcony, something pulled her back. Fear? Regret? Or was it simply punishment, knowing she had to live with what she had done? Adaugo sat at the dining table, absently stirring the tea in her cup, the spoon clinking against the ceramic. She had been feeling off all day, a nagging discomfort in her chest that she couldn't quite place. It had been weeks since she started adjusting to her new reality, raising Chigazi alone, dealing with the whispers of Uche's hidden secrets, and fighting to move forward despite the darkness looming over her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of small feet running across the floor. Chigazi climbed into the seat across from her, his uniform slightly rumpled from the school day, his little face full of curiosity. "Mommy," he started, resting his chin on his hand. "Something weird happened today at school." She set the spoon down, giving him her full attention. "What is it, baby?" He hesitated for a moment, swinging his legs under the chair. "A lot of people keep asking me if I have a twin." Adaugo's breath hitched. "A twin? Yes," he said, eyes widening with excitement. "There's this boy in my school that looks just like me. Everyone says we look the same. Some of my classmates even asked if we were brothers." Her fingers tightened around the cup, her heart pounding. She forced a smile. "And what did you say?" Chigazi shrugged. "I told them I don't have a twin. But Mummy, I saw him today. And he does look like me. Same nose, same eyes, even the same smile." He giggled. "It's so funny. Do I really have a secret twin?" Adaugo's mind raced. No, this isn't possible. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea, taking a slow sip to steady herself. "What's his name?" she asked carefully. Chigazi frowned, thinking. "I don't know. He's in another class. But his mummy comes to pick him up sometimes. She's always wearing dark glasses. My teacher said we should stop making noise about it, but people still talk." Adaugo swallowed hard. A woman in dark glasses. A boy who looked exactly like Chigazi. A chill crept up her spine. Chiamaka. She hadn't seen her in months, not since the funeral. Their paths hadn't crossed, and she hadn't thought much about it. But now, the whispers were finding their way back to her. She reached across the table, smoothing Chigazi's hair with a forced smile. "Don't worry about what people say, okay? You don't have a twin. Now go wash your hands and change out of your uniform." Chigazi, unfazed, hopped off his chair and ran to his room. Adaugo sat motionless, her fingers gripping the table's edge. The world around her had just shifted again, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. The police had been relentless in their pursuit of justice for Uche. A man of his wealth and influence did not just die without consequence. Detectives had been pulling records, reviewing security footage, and questioning anyone who might have known about his business dealings. The murder had been brutal, calculated, a hit, not a random attack. The CCTV footage from the church's surrounding area had been useless. The men were masked, the license plates covered. Whoever orchestrated the attack had made sure to leave no loose ends. But the authorities weren't giving up. They had tracked phone calls made around the time of the incident and had narrowed down a few suspicious numbers that had been used near the crime scene. Numbers that led them to known criminals. The pieces were slowly coming together. Meanwhile, Chiamaka sat in her dimly lit apartment, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The number flashing on her screen sent a fresh wave of dread through her. She had already settled them, paid them off. But they wouldn't stop calling, wouldn't stop demanding. She hesitated for a moment, her heartbeat loud in her ears, before answering. "You again," she hissed, keeping her voice low. A slow chuckle came from the other end. "Ah, madam. That's not how you greet someone who helped you. I already paid you. You got your money. What more do you want?" The voice turned sharp. "We settled?" "No, madam. We only took what you could afford at the time. But we still day wait for the balance. Abi, you think say we go just forget?" She closed her eyes, gripping the phone harder. "I don't have any more money for you." The man laughed again, this time darker. "Nah, so you be? No walla. If you no pay, maybe we go find another way to get our money. Maybe from that fine boy we see you with sometimes." Her blood ran cold. "You dare not!" she snapped, standing up from the couch. "If you so much as come near my son, then pay what you owe." The voice cut in, calm and firm. "You know where to find us." The line went dead. Chiamaka let out a shaky breath, running a hand down her face. This wasn't supposed to go like this. She had lost everything. And now, it seemed, she was about to lose more. The last thing she expected that evening was to hear from Adaugo. Her phone rang, and for a brief moment, she debated ignoring it. But something inside her told her that if she didn't pick up, Adaugo would keep calling, keep looking for answers. Taking a deep breath, she swiped to answer. "I never thought you'd be like this." Adaugo's voice came through immediately, hurt, accusing. "You abandoned me. You didn't even show up for his burial. Do you know how much that hurt?" Chiamaka clenched her jaw, forcing herself to keep her tone steady. "I was out of town," she lied smoothly. "I hadn't returned yet. By the time I got back, it was already over." Silence. "You could have at least called." Adaugo's voice was quieter now, but the hurt remained. "You were my best friend, Chiamaka. And yet, when I needed you the most, you disappeared." Chiamaka closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have been there. You should have." Adaugo agreed. "But you weren't." Another pause. "I need to see you," Adaugo continued. "We need to talk." Chiamaka's pulse quickened. "Talk about what? About Uche?" "About everything." A sharp knot formed in her stomach. This was bad. Very bad. I don't know if that's a good idea, Adaugo. Things are complicated. Since when do we avoid complications? Adaugo asked, a trace of her old fire returning. "I'll come to your place. Tomorrow." Before Chiamaka could protest, the call ended. Her phone slipped from her hands onto the couch. Tomorrow. Adaugo was coming tomorrow, and Chiamaka had no idea what she was going to say. The police had intensified their investigation, and now, Adaugo was no longer just a grieving widow, she was a person of interest. She had been with Uche when he was murdered. She had witnessed everything, the gunshot, the acid, the masked men, but the detectives weren't convinced that she was just a victim. "Madam," the lead investigator, Detective Amonike, sat across from her in the station, his piercing gaze unwavering. "You were the only one with him that night. And yet, somehow, you survived while he didn't. We need to understand exactly what happened." Adaugo swallowed hard. "I've told you everything I remember. she said, voice shaking. We were on our way to the church for our wedding. The road was blocked. The men came out of nowhere. They shot him before I could even react. Detective Amonike leaned forward. And the acid? Why attack you? What was the motive? She clenched her fists. I don't know. Maybe it was a robbery. Maybe someone wanted to ruin my life. She stopped, exhaling shakily. I don't know. The detective tapped his fingers on the desk. We found no reports of threats against Uche before his murder. He had rivals in business, yes, but none of them had motives strong enough to eliminate him in such a violent way. Adaugo's head was spinning. Are you saying you think I had something to do with this? The detective didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a file, flipping through pages. We're looking into everyone connected to him, including you, Mrs. Uche. But I have to ask, do you have any enemies? Adaugo's mind immediately went to Chiamaka. But the thought was ridiculous, wasn't it? Chiamaka had been her best friend. They had been through everything together. Yet, something didn't feel right. Later that evening, Adaugo sat on the couch in Chiamaka's apartment, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she barely had the strength to sip. The police questioning had drained her, left her feeling exposed, vulnerable. I don't understand why they're treating me like a suspect, she whispered. Chiamaka sat beside her, rubbing her back gently. You were the only one there, Adaugo. Of course, they have to ask questions. But don't worry, you'll be fine. Adaugo turned to her, eyes filled with confusion. But why? Why would someone want him dead? And why? Why the acid? It wasn't just about killing him. It was about making sure I suffered too. Chiamaka swallowed, shifting slightly. Some people have darkness in them, Adaugo. Maybe someone wanted revenge. Adaugo sighed. Uche was a good man, Chiamaka. Yes, I'm angry at him for lying about Kingsley. Yes, I feel betrayed. But he didn't deserve this. The words hung heavy in the air. For a split second, Chiamaka wanted to speak, to confess, but she couldn't, not now. Instead, she reached for Adaugo's hand, squeezing it gently. No matter what happens, I'm here for you. Adaugo nodded, unaware of the war raging inside the woman beside her. The park was bustling with life. Children's laughter filled the air, the scent of roasted corn and suya drifting from nearby vendors. Adaugo sat on a bench, watching Chigazi chase after his friends, his little legs moving as fast as they could. His joy was innocent, pure, a contrast to the storm raging inside her. Beside her, Chiamaka sat stiffly, her sunglasses shielding her eyes, though Adaugo could sense her tension. The weight of their last conversation still lingered, unspoken. Then, without warning, Adaugo turned to her. I never asked you this before, she said, her voice careful, measured. But, your son, does his father ever come to see him? Chiamaka inhaled sharply, the question catching her off guard. She forced out a short, nervous laugh. No. He's been out of the picture for years. She was lying. Adaugo could feel it. And then, before she could press further, sirens filled the air. The sound sliced through the peaceful park, heads turning, children pausing mid-play. A fleet of police vehicles skidded to a halt near the entrance, officers spilling out, their movements swift and deliberate. Chiamaka felt her blood run cold. Then, Madam Chiamaka, you are under arrest for the murder of Mr. Uchenna. The words hit her like a slap. Her body stiffened as she turned, her mind screaming for an escape. But there was nowhere to run. Adaugo's breath caught in her throat. What? The lead officer stepped forward, his eyes sharp, unwavering. We have reason to believe you were involved in planning Mr. Uche's assassination. The men responsible for his death attempted to flee the country but were apprehended. They have named you as the one who orchestrated the attack. Chiamaka shook her head rapidly. No, it's not true. But the look on Adaugo's face, the dawning realization, the betrayal, the horror, was unbearable. Adaugo rose slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Chiamaka, tell me this isn't true. Chiamaka opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her silence was an answer in itself. The officers stepped forward, their handcuffs glinting in the sunlight. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Tears burned in Chiamaka's eyes. Her chest rose and fell in sharp, panicked breaths. How had it come to this? How had she lost everything? She turned to Adaugo, desperation leaking into her voice. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, she blurted. It wasn't supposed to go that way. I just wanted. She choked on her words. But Adaugo was already stepping back, disgust, pain, and fury battling in her eyes. You killed him, she whispered. You killed the father of my child. The officers pulled Chiamaka's hands behind her back, the cold metal of the handcuffs snapping into place. As they led her toward the police car, she couldn't bring herself to fight anymore. Everything was over. And she had no one to blame but herself. The courtroom was silent as the judge's gavel struck the wooden block. For the murder of Mr. Uche and conspiracy to commit grievous harm, this court hereby sentences the accused, Chiamaka, to life imprisonment. The words echoed through the chambers, sealing her fate. Chiamaka sat motionless, her once proud shoulders slumped in defeat. Her world had crumbled beyond repair. The weight of her actions, the choices she had made, the lives she had ruined, pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. There were no tears left to cry. No protests to make. She had lost everything. After her sentencing, her son was placed in the custody of Uche's first wife. Though the woman had every reason to resent the child, she didn't. Instead, she raised him alongside Chigizi, giving him the love and care that Chiamaka had been too blinded by jealousy to provide. The boy grew up seeing the contrast between selfish ambition and selfless love. But it was Uche's first son, Kingsley, who made the most unexpected choice. When he came of age, he chose to share his inheritance with his stepbrother, refusing to follow in his mother's footsteps of greed and betrayal. It wasn't his fault, Kingsley said when people questioned his decision. He didn't choose this. He deserves a chance at life just like I do. Unlike his mother, he understood that power and wealth meant nothing if they came at the cost of one's soul. Chiamaka sat on the hard, narrow cot, her back against the cold wall. The air inside the cell smelled of damp cement and old regrets. Outside, the dull echo of prison life carried on, shouted orders, the distant clang of metal doors, the occasional outburst of laughter from inmates who had long accepted their fate. But she couldn't accept hers. She stared at the faded, crumpled photograph in her hands, her son at 3 years old, his chubby cheeks lifted in a wide, toothy grin. It was the only piece of her past that remained. The ink was smudged, worn from the countless times she had traced his tiny face with trembling fingers. Once she had been powerful, feared, a woman who pulled strings from the shadows. Now, she was just another number in an orange jumpsuit, forgotten by the world she had tried to control. Her fingers tightened around the photo as footsteps approached. She held her breath, hoping, maybe today, maybe this time, someone had come for her. A guard stopped at her cell, tapping his baton against the bars. You have a visitor, he announced. Her heart leaped, her body stiff as she stood. But when she stepped into the visitation room, the plastic chair across from her was empty. No one came, the guard muttered, barely sparing her a glance. Again. The words sliced through her like a blade. Slowly, she sank into the chair, staring at the empty space where her son should have been. He hadn't come. He never would. Tears welled in her eyes, but she swallowed them down. This was her punishment, not just the prison walls, not just the years stripped away. The real punishment was this: to be alive, yet completely erased. The prison infirmary was quiet that night, save for the slow, labored breaths from the last bed in the corner. Chiamaka lay motionless, her face gaunt, her once bright eyes dull and unfocused. The nurses barely glanced her way. She had no family listed, no visitors, no one checking in. Just another inmate. Another name on the roster, waiting to be crossed off. Her fingers twitched, reaching for something, someone. But there was nothing. No warm hand to hold. No familiar voice whispering comfort. Just the hum of flickering lights above her, the distant sound of laughter from guards outside. When she exhaled one last time, no one noticed. No one mourned. By morning, her bed was empty, the sheets stripped, the records updated. No funeral. No memorial. Just a name, erased from the world as if she had never existed. Moral lessons from the story: karma is real. Evil may seem to win for a moment, but the truth always comes out. No matter how well a crime is planned, justice will always catch up. In the end, Chiamaka lost everything, while the child she left behind learned from her mistakes and chose a better path. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories filled with suspense, lessons, and deep emotions. Like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.